A mere haircut ago, I covered the BattleTech Beginner's Box, comparing its contents and rules to the base box over there on my shelf. And you know what? Surprisingly, many viewers asked me if I could actually cover the core set as well as a result. So, okay, because you requested it, let's crack open this base box and see how its rule set and components compare to the BattleTech Beginner's Box. I recently produced a video comparing the BattleTech Beginner Box to its more sophisticated sibling, the BattleTech Base Box, to compare their differences and determine whether that introductory version of the game still captured the essence of the 30th century mechanized combat you find over here. You can click here, or maybe there, but you can click somewhere to watch that video about the Beginner Box and how it differs. And that video led some viewers to ask questions and share their opinion about how the base box and the beginner box differ, including asking for more information about the pilot cards that we saw, recommending that new players just skip the beginner rules and go right for the core set, asking about the Alpha Strike cards, which I'm actually going to cover in more detail at the end of this video. Viewers also asked about the differences in the rules between the two versions, and some even went so far as to provide insightful comments pointing out that the beginner's box is merely a symptom of a society that has become far less intelligent as we seem to desire baby basic and insulting products, such as this one. A medium range shot adds a +2 target number modifier, while a long range shot adds a +4 target modifier to your roll.
This game is for babies and adults as both.
Now, I believe that the beginner box provides a comprehensive enough introduction to the game for a new player to do more than just get their feet wet. But it's true, if you really want the full tactical BattleTech experience, well, the base box is definitely worth looking into. The base box takes the concepts introduced in the beginner version over there and adds in several more technical rules, such as tracking your mech's heat buildup, weapon allocation and critical hit locations, the inner structure of your mech that its armor protects, advanced combat options, additional consequences of damage, and more stuff, like actuators. Oh, actuators. If my Wolverine takes a critical hit to its hip actuator and limps off the battlefield one more time, I swear that I'm going to... Let's take a look now at the base box's components and highlight some of the rules in order to see a little more details about how this version works. For those of you who may not be familiar with BattleTech, this is a tactical war game in which players command squads of giant war machines called battle mechs, operated by courageous, some may say foolish, pilots called mech warriors. The game system includes details such as varying weapon ranges, heat generation, and specific hit locations such as arms, heads, and legs, each having its own strategic value. The game is typically played on maps that feature pre-printed hex grids, but there are optional rules for hexless games that are also available. Whereas the beginner box included 8 cardboard standees and 2 plastic mechs, the base box includes 9 cardboard standees and 8 plastic mechs. These being a range of light to heavy mechs including Battle Masters, Awesomes, Thunderbolts, Catapults, Wolverines, a Griffin, the iconic Shadowhawk, Commandos, and my personal all-time favorite, the Locust. Locust pilots are nuts! Also included in the box are copyable record sheets for each of those mechs, 2 two-sided paper hex-based maps, some additional terrain to modify those maps, 2 6-sided dice, a short story called Ice Storm, a 14-page primer booklet full of flavor text about the BattleTech universe, a 2-sided cardboard reference sheet listing modifiers, 2 hit locations, and other roll results, 8 2-sided mech warrior cards with a different stat on each side for a total of 16 different characters, 8 2-sided Alpha Strike cards, also with different stats on each side, which I'll get back to in a little bit here, and a full-color 56-page rulebook covering setup, movement, combat, damage resolution, heat, piloting, falling, different scenarios, and one of my personal favorite aspects of the game, rules for constructing your own custom-made mechs. And boy howdy, that is the main difference between the beginner and base boxes. The beginner box's 12-page rulebook provides enough structure to get players up and running, but with a rulebook that's nearly 5 times larger, the base game provides a mature rule set that's been vetted and expanded over time to provide a pretty sophisticated wargaming experience. Well, at least to someone like me who's never had the courage to plunk themselves down at a table to play something like Advanced Squad Leader for an hour, or 2, or 16. It would take quite a while to cover all of the rules that are included in the base game. So here's a general overview in case you're curious about what the base game adds into the mix. Well, first off, your maps here introduce several new features, such as terrain types, elevation, and water, each of which have an effect on the ability of your mech to move around the board and do stuff. Stuff like survive. And in this version of the game, mechs will have more options as they move about, such as walking forwards and backwards, running, jumping, submerging underwater, laying prone, and pivoting their torsos to widen their firing range. There's also more considerations when it comes to combat, such as more specific weapon ranges and firing arcs, elevation modifiers, and line of sight restrictions. Yes, that's right, line of sight. So go ahead, say it, get out of your system. There's also many more options for physical combat, like punching and kicking and shoving, and the ever-present death from above, also known as, if I'm going out, I'm taking you with me. Oh, and of course, more combat options mean more options for how your marvelous mech can take damage. I previously mentioned that one of the differences between the beginner and base versions of the game is that while beginner mechs simply have a layer of armor that serve as its hit points, in the full version of the game, there's an additional layer of what's called inner structure below that armor. This inner structure has its own set of hit points, and every time it takes damage, well, there's the possibility of something going catastrophically wrong. These catastrophically wrong moments are called critical hits. A critical hit introduces a fun little mini challenge for the mech warrior, like an ammunition explosion or engine failure, actuator failure, also known as battle mech arthritis, a loss of life support, increased heat generation, or the explosive loss of an entire limb, such as a leg, arm, or even the mech's head. Where, I would like to remind you, is where the mech warrior pilot is sitting. Well, in that case, was sitting. And you might think that all of those critical catastrophes that are just sitting there waiting to happen would be enough for a player to have to worry about, but no. Let me introduce you to the bane of every mech warrior, the enemy of efficiency, the most embarrassing way to blow up your own brand new Crusader: heat. Everything that your mech does generates heat. Things like walking, firing weapons, using equipment. Heck, I'm sure that in the BattleTech universe, even quietly reading a good book in the corner generates enough heat to raise international sea levels a few inches worldwide. So, just in case it wasn't clear, heat is not your friend. Because the more heat that your mech accumulates, the more penalties it receives. Penalties ranging from moving slower, to aiming worse, to shutting itself down, to exploding. There's several different ways to manage heat, which I'm not going to go into detail about here. But the point is that heat becomes a critical resource that the player must manage throughout the course of the game. The player must constantly be balancing what they want to accomplish with how much heat that would generate against the dire consequences that would result if they pushed their luck just a little bit too far. So there's a look at the additional rules and components that are included in the base box. There are a lot of goodies in there that aren't present over in the beginner's box. And one of the most surprising goodies, which I didn't even know was a thing that existed in this universe until, as I mentioned earlier, I discovered it inside the box, are these 8 two-sided Alpha Strike cards. What's Alpha Strike? Well, Alpha Strike, it turns out, is a fast-playing form of BattleTech developed with modern tabletop miniature wargaming in mind. In it, mechs are represented by these unit cards, which are highly simplified versions of the traditional record sheets. The Alpha Strike version of the game can still be played on a hex grid map, but it's also designed to be played freeform using tape measures instead. Dice are still used to resolve attacks, with damage degrading a unit's performance as the game goes on. But the best part of this discovery is that there's a free 39-page PDF Alpha Strike rulebook available on the BattleTech.com website. So if you have the cards that are included in the BattleTech base game and an internet connection, you have everything that you need in order to play this variant. So there's a look at what's included in the core set of the BattleTech Advanced Box. This is a game that has captured my imagination for over 30 years. And thanks to the quality and the comprehensiveness of this edition of the game, I suspect that the major houses of the Inner Sphere will still be around, piloting giant mechanized warriors as they battle for control of distant landscapes, even 30 years from now. So, there's a look at what's included in the core set of the BattleTech Advanced Box. This is a game that has captured my attention for over 30 years. And it's upside down, darn it. So there's a look at what's included in the core set. So there's a look at what's included. So there's a look at what's so there's a look over 30. It's an upside down again. So there's a look at what's included in the core set of the BattleTop. So there's a look at what's included in them. Oh, it's okay. You know, maybe you could just hold it. So there's a look at what's included in the core set of the BattleTech base box.